Courtrooms demand respect. But what happens when kids show up with zero remorse and an attitude to match? From a teen who boldly argued with the judge over his phone, to another who heartlessly mocked a victim's grieving mother, these young offenders showed a shocking lack of respect when it mattered most. Join us in this video as we take a look at 8 most disrespectful courtroom kid moments.
18-year-old William Demopoulos from Berea, Ohio, found himself in court for what should have been a regular probation hearing. He was facing charges for criminal damage, unauthorized use of a motor vehicle, and obstructing official business. It seemed like a routine day, but William had something else in mind. 18-year-old William Demopoulos. He's on probation for criminally damaging unauthorized use of a motor vehicle and obstructing official business. The hearing started out like normal, but things took a turn when Judge Chris Green asked William to hand over his phone to the probation officer. Now, for most people, this wouldn't be a big deal, as Judge Chris Green is annoyed with Demopoulos for refusing to hand over his cell phone to a probation officer. But for William, it was a major problem. He flat out refused to give up his phone, holding onto it as if it was the most valuable thing in the world. You could tell right then that this wasn't going to end well for him. The judge patiently explained the rules of probation and why William had to hand over the phone. He even broke it down in simple terms, making sure William understood the situation. But William wasn't hearing it. He insisted it's not like that, trying to defend himself, but anyone watching could tell it was exactly like that. William just didn't want to let go of the phone. At this point, the judge had had enough. His patience ran out and he ordered the deputies to place William in handcuffs. And instead of calmly accepting what was coming, William decided to make things worse for himself. In a shocking move, he jumped up onto the courtroom table like he was planning to make some kind of dramatic escape. But let's be real, there wasn't anywhere for him to go. The officers quickly reacted, grabbing William and pulling him back down before he could even get his footing. The whole thing only lasted a few seconds, but those few seconds were enough to make everything worse for William. The courtroom calmed down after the brief chaos, but for William, the damage was already done. The judge wasn't about to ignore what had just happened. Not only did he revoke William's probation, but he also added another charge, resisting arrest. And to top it all off, the judge sentenced William to 40 days in jail. What started as a simple probation hearing turned into a full-blown mess, all because William refused to give up his phone. Instead of walking out of court with his freedom, he walked out with handcuffs and a jail sentence. It's a lesson in how things can quickly spiral out of control when you don't follow the rules. William could have avoided all of this, but in the end, his phone cost him his freedom.
Penelope Soto's court appearance on February 4, 2013 was anything but ordinary. Facing charges for possessing Xanax, a controlled substance, she should have been taking the situation seriously. After 4 nights in jail, Soto apologized to the judge and explained that she was still high on alcohol and Xanax. However, the moment she walked into the courtroom, it was clear she had no intention of showing respect. Her attitude, demeanor, and complete disregard for the proceedings set the stage for a hearing that no one would forget. Things kicked off with Judge Jorge Rodriguez Chomat asking Soto some basic questions about her finances. Instead of answering like someone who is facing serious charges, she responded with an attitude. Her tone was snarky and she was laughing as if the whole thing didn't matter to her at all. When the judge asked her if she owned anything of value, Soto casually mentioned her jewelry, saying it was worth a lot of money. But the judge wasn't impressed by her answers, and it was obvious he wasn't amused by her behavior. Then came a key moment. The judge asked if she had taken any drugs in the past 24 hours. Soto, without hesitation, denied it, but her actions told a different story. She was acting strange, jittery even. Despite her claim, it was pretty clear to everyone watching that something wasn't quite right with how she was behaving. Still, the judge didn't push it any further and went ahead with setting her bond at $5,000. Soto had no prior run-ins with the law, so Dade County Circuit Judge Jose Rodriguez Chomat set bail at $5,000. Now, most people in that situation would start realizing how serious things were, but not Soto. Instead of taking the judge's decision seriously, she smirked and laughed as she turned to walk away. and then, just as she was about to leave, she mumbled something rude under her breath. Judge Rodriguez Chomat didn't let that slide. He immediately called her back, and with no hesitation, he doubled her bond from $5,000 to $10,000. It was a clear message. He wasn't going to put up with her disrespect. G1 would be $10,000. Are you serious? I am serious. All the bail. But even this wasn't enough to get through to Soto. Instead of calming down, she made things worse. As she walked away again, she yelled a curse word at the judge. That's fine. Our whole system depends on respect for judges and their orders, and when there's outrageous disrespect loud enough for the whole courtroom to hear, that was it. The judge had heard enough. Without missing a beat, he found her direct contempt of court and sentenced her to 30 days in county jail, right on the spot. Oh, you did say that? I find you direct criminal contempt, 30 days in the county jail. The whole courtroom seemed to freeze as Soto realized she had gone way too far. What started as a routine hearing for drug charges turned into a complete disaster for her. But the story didn't end there. Soto's behavior was all caught on camera, and before long, the video of the courtroom exchange went viral. People everywhere couldn't believe how she had acted in front of the judge, and it became one of the most talked about moments online. Soto's courtroom meltdown was suddenly all over the internet, with everyone watching her throw her chance at leniency out the window. However, just 2 days later, there was a twist. The court decided to reduce her bond back to the original $5,000, giving her a chance to fix her mistake. 4 days after her wild outburst, Soto returned to the courtroom, but this time, she wasn't the same person. She had clearly thought long and hard about her actions. When she stood before the judge again, she was calm, quiet, and respectful. She apologized sincerely, calling her previous behavior irrational. My behavior was very irrational, and I apologized not only to the court. She owned up to what she had done, and Judge Rodriguez Chomat could see that she was truly sorry. Seeing her change of heart, the judge decided to show her some mercy. He revoked the 30 days jail sentence and instead ordered her to complete a drug treatment program. Soto took this second chance seriously and has volunteered to attend the drug rehabilitation clinic. A much more forgiving judge vacated Soto's 30-day sentence. Over the next year, she worked hard to finish the program, and by the end of it, her drug charges were dropped. It was a huge turnaround for someone who had started off by disrespecting the court in such a major way. This story became more than just about Penelope Soto's day in court. It turned into a lesson for anyone who thinks they can behave however they want in a courtroom and get away with it.
Alyssa Bustamante's story is one that will leave you absolutely shaken. She wasn't your typical 15-year-old girl in 2009 in a small, quiet town in Missouri. She did something that no one could have ever imagined. Alyssa Bustamante is still recognizable as the teenager arrested in the fall of 2009. Something so horrible, it still haunts people today. Alyssa lived next door to 9-year-old Elizabeth Olin, a sweet little girl who trusted Alyssa because, after all, they were neighbors. Elizabeth thought Alyssa was a friend, someone safe. But one day, when Elizabeth went outside to play, Alyssa had other plans that would lead to something truly terrifying. It all started when Elizabeth's little sister, Emma, asked her mom if Elizabeth could come out to play. Her mom said yes, but she told Elizabeth to make sure she was home by 6 p.m. Elizabeth agreed and headed out, but she would never return home that evening. Instead of playing like they usually would, Alyssa convinced Elizabeth to follow her into a wooded area near their homes. Alyssa told her she had something special to show her. What Elizabeth didn't know was that Alyssa had been planning something awful. Once they were deep in the woods, things took a horrifying turn. Alyssa attacked Elizabeth, first strangling her and then stabbing her over and over again. The murder of 9-year-old neighbor Elizabeth Olin. If convicted of first-degree murder, Bustamante could not have been executed. It was brutal, far worse than anyone could imagine, especially considering how young both girls were. Afterward, Alyssa buried Elizabeth's body in a shallow grave she had dug earlier, a grave she had prepared before even luring Elizabeth into the woods. Back at home, Elizabeth's family started to worry when she didn't come back at the expected time. Her mom had told her to be home by 6, but as the clock ticked past that time, the panic began to set in. The entire neighborhood joined in the search, hoping to find Elizabeth safe and sound, not realizing the awful truth. Elizabeth was already gone. As the search went on, Alyssa acted like nothing had happened. She even told her sister Emma to keep quiet and not say a word about Elizabeth. And Emma, scared and confused, did just that. Days went by, and still no one could find Elizabeth. It was then that the police started to focus on Alyssa. At first, no one really suspected her. She was young and seemed like just another teenager, but little things began to raise red flags. For example, Alyssa's behavior was strange, too calm for someone whose neighbor had gone missing. And when the police questioned her about a hole they found in the woods, Alyssa casually admitted that she had dug it, but said it was just for fun. That's when things started to unravel. The police began digging deeper into Alyssa's life and discovered some deeply disturbing things on her social media. There were posts that hinted at violent thoughts, and they found out she had a dark side that no one had noticed before. But the most horrifying discovery came from Alyssa's very own diary. In her diary, Alyssa had written in chilling detail about the day she killed Elizabeth. She described it as amazing and said it had given her a rush like nothing else. This diary entry was the final piece of the puzzle. Alyssa had written down exactly what she had done, and there was no denying the truth any longer. When the police confronted her, Alyssa confessed. She led them to the grave where she had buried Elizabeth. The entire community was in shock. No one could believe that a 15-year-old had done something so terrible to someone she knew, someone who trusted her. At Alyssa's trial, she first pleaded not guilty, but it wasn't long before she changed her plea to guilty. She says that ruling changed her thinking, basically. The main reason for the diary entries were read out loud in court, and they showed just how cold and calculated Alyssa's actions had been. She had planned the murder, carried it out, and even enjoyed it. It was more than anyone could comprehend. In the end, Alyssa was sentenced to life in prison with the possibility of parole, plus 30 years for armed criminal action. But Elizabeth's family didn't feel like justice had been served. They didn't believe Alyssa should ever get out of prison. And during the sentencing, Elizabeth's mom made it clear just how angry and heartbroken she was. Alyssa did express some regret during her sentencing. She apologized, saying she was sorry for what she had done. But to Elizabeth's family, those words weren't enough. Nothing could bring back their little girl, and no apology could erase the pain of losing her in such a horrible way. This case shocked not just the small town where it happened, but the entire nation. People couldn't wrap their heads around the idea that someone so young could commit such a terrible crime.
This story is about TJ Lane, and it's one that still sends chills down the spine. In February 2012, Lane walked into Chardon High School in Ohio, where he was just another student, but that all changed in an instant when he pulled out a gun and opened fire on his classmates. The date was February 27th. TJ Lane, as he pleads guilty to the murders of 3 of his classmates in what should have been a regular school day, turned into a nightmare that would never be forgotten. It was the cafeteria where the shooting began. Kids were grabbing food, talking with their friends, completely unaware of what was about to happen. And then suddenly, shots rang out. Panic erupted. Students ran for cover, and 911 calls flooded in as terrified kids and teachers tried to make sense of the chaos TJ Lane had started, his deadly rampage, leaving destruction in his path. We asked Michelle Miller to find out what she could about the suspect, TJ Lane. One of the heroes that day was the school assistant football coach, Frank Hall. As soon as he realized what was happening, he didn't hesitate. He chased Lane out of the building, not caring about his own safety. He's the assistant football coach who chased the gunman out of the school. Hall's bravery likely saved more lives, as Lane was soon found outside by the police and taken into custody. But the damage had already been done. 3 young lives were lost because of Lane's actions. 16-year-old Daniel Palmer was killed right there in the cafeteria. 17-year-old Russell King Jr. and 16-year-old Demetrius Hewlin were rushed to the hospital, but sadly didn't survive. Another student, Nick Walzak, was shot as well, and though he lived, he was left paralyzed for the rest of his life. All of these kids were just going about their day, never imagining that it would be their last. Lane was only 17 years old when he committed these terrible crimes, but the court didn't see him as just a kid. He was charged as an adult with 3 counts of murder. People who knew him described him as quiet and someone who mostly kept to himself. But as more details emerged, it became clear that Lane had a troubled past. His home life was far from stable. His father had been to prison for assault, and his mother wasn't around much. Lane's friends said he seemed lost, but no one expected anything like this. When it came time for court, Lane first tried to use insanity as his defense. He claimed he heard voices in his head telling him what to do. But after some evaluations, the court ruled that he was competent to stand trial. To avoid the death penalty, Lane eventually pleaded guilty to the murders. But if you thought he would show any remorse, you'd be wrong. During his sentencing, the families of the victims had a chance to speak. They stood in court, heartbroken, pouring out their grief to the boy who had taken their children away from them. But instead of showing regret, Lane did something shocking. He walked into the courtroom with a smile on his face and then unbuttoned his shirt, revealing a white t-shirt underneath with the word "killer" scrawled across it. This was the same kind of shirt he had worn the day of the shooting. He wore it like a badge, proud of what he had done. As if that wasn't enough, Lane looked the grieving families right in the eyes and said something that no one will ever forget. With a cold grin, he told them, "This hand that pulled the trigger, that killed your son?" There was no apology, no sign of guilt, just a heartless killer mocking the pain he had caused. In the end, TJ Lane was sentenced to life in prison without any possibility of parole. For the families of the victims, there was no real comfort in that. Their children were gone and nothing could bring them back, but at least they knew that Lane would never be free to hurt anyone again.